welcome to another episode of the King Ugly Crude. It is book club tonight. So we are going to be discussing The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. Great book. We have a couple of questions that we took from a thought.co website, and I think you're going to enjoy them. Oh, sorry. You're right. Thoughtco.com. Sorry. Thoughtco.com page. And it is called The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson, book club discussion questions. And as usual, these questions are going to spark other questions just like normal. So first, let's talk about the basic plot line of the book. Anybody want to do a rough outline of the book?
Basically, there was a guy, he died, the end.
That was terrible.
Hey, Griffith.
That's like the short version, definitely. He's not wrong.
That's the short version of Game of Thrones.
That's about the short version of a lot of things.
There was a guy, they did some stuff, and then it ended.
So
you're the worst.
There were two guys.
Well, there was way more than two, but two main guys, really. But it follows two characters. Burnham, which he was the architect for the World's Fair, and H.H. Holmes, who is a serial killer from 1893. And that's the architect that... So Burnham was the architect for the World's Fair from 1893. That was the one that was...
Also known as the White City.
The White City. That was the one that was known... Dang.
Sorry, that was my bad.
Totally was your bad. Anyway, so... and then basically what... I'm going to start that over. I'll just edit it out. So it's about an architect named Burnham. I know his last name's Burnham. What do you guys remember? Do you remember his first name? Daniel Burnham. Daniel Burnham. And he was an architect for the World's Fair 1893. That was the fair that, or also called the White City. That was the fair that was lit by Tesla and Westinghouse.
I knew you were going to say that.
You have Cracker Jack started there. Hires Root Beer. Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer was there. That's where it was brought out. So there's a lot of cool things that started there.
The Ferris wheel.
Yeah, and that's where
the first Ferris wheel. How do you forget biggest thing ever?
Let's be honest. I mean, like the way that they describe that Ferris wheel, totally different than anybody thinks of a Ferris wheel these days. So
yeah, it would never get off the ground here. No.
Right. It wouldn't. But what I'm saying is that it's a completely different type of still a Ferris wheel, and because the guy's name was Ferris that made it.
I think it's more along the lines of the Link down in Vegas. Have you guys been on that one?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like.
Which is still called a Ferris wheel.
Yep. It absolutely is.
Huge.
And then the other person that it follows is H.H. Holmes. He was a serial killer in the 1893. Well, actually, that's when he left. Is after the 1893 World's Fair, but
before and after.
So there was a good time leading up to that, a bunch of different things, and it walks through that the whole fair part. Walks through H.H. Holmes getting caught, and that's a quick synopsis. You guys anything to add?
Well, I just read that. I didn't realize that he confessed to only 27 murders, which that's obviously he killed way more than that. Yeah, probably. But that's just nuts to me. Like, that's like the only people. I mean, I don't know. Why not just confess to the rest of them if you're already 27 in?
I don't know if he even remembered how many he did. And to be honest, at the end of it, he confessed to more murders than he actually did, because they ended up finding out that he didn't do those murders. Because he was always trying to trick people.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the guy was super smart when it came to being a trickster, if you will.
Con man.
Con man, and yeah, absolutely a grifter. So... I mean,
he's one of those people who always thought that he was smarter than everybody else. And so it was fun to play with people, and he liked to demonstrate that prowess without anybody except him knowing. And so, yeah, I mean, he would let's see what these suckers will believe.
He must have really honed his personable skills by watching other people. Because, I mean, definitely the guy is, without a doubt, a psychopath. And, the way that they describe psychopaths is that they don't have real feelings, but that they can mimic them. That dude, he figured out how to mimic them to the T.
I mean, look at Ted Bundy. Same thing. Everyone loved Ted Bundy once you met him. Like, he was a really good, outgoing character. But man, he's another terrible serial killer.
Well, and if you look at one of the things that Bundy and Holmes had in common, the thing that people always describe them as charming. They always say, "Oh, he's so charming," and charm is nothing but a bedazzlement. Charm is an outfit you put on.
Yeah, but here's a weird thing with him: is he was rather ostentatious. Holmes, yes, he was rather ostentatious in the fact that in because if I remember correctly, and maybe I'm wrong, but Ted Bundy, like, he killed people, but like he tried to do everything else right so he didn't get caught. It's like this guy was just like, he did everything the wrong way and still didn't get caught. I mean, geez Louise, I mean, amazing. That's all I would say. Like how that didn't get him arrested the first time, you know?
Well,
sorry.
Oh, that's okay. And I don't think that Holmes could have operated now.
Definitely not.
He took advantage of
people specific, like personal people. Like that's how he was able to do it.
And he also knew that the girls that he was targeting, he knew that it would be weeks or even months before they were missed, before the parents started going, I haven't gotten a letter in a while. What's going on? The mail system, the fact that Chicago was so chaotic, the fact that people are coming in and out for the fair, the fact that, again, he's a doctor, and so he is to be trusted. Just all of that, he worked to his advantage. But I don't think that he could operate now with communication being instantaneous. He relied on the fact that he had time to cover his tracks before anybody noticed that they were missing.
I agree with it to a point, but I also think that he might be, I mean, like, I don't know. Somebody like that, I can totally see, figuring out how to work that system over still.
It's not unlikely.
It's not. It's really not.
But
not in
the credit part of it, maybe not as much because it's not as personable that way. But everything else, I mean, like, the amazing thing is how forthright he was with all of his information to the police and other people. He says, I haven't seen him, but if I do, I'll let you know.
Well, I mean, that's the best way to not be a suspect. Don't act suspicious. He knew how to not be suspicious.
Yeah.
That was only a little bit creepy.
You guys haven't seen Parks and Rec?
No.
Gosh, dang it, you guys are old.
I watched one episode.
My wife is laughing hysterically right now.
Has nothing to do with old. It is the same
as The
retarded humor as The Office.
Okay, guys, hit me up on the social medias. Stop it, Griffith. Hit me up on social media at King Ugly Crew if you understand what I just said. Okay, let me know that I'm not just an idiot here. Okay, thanks.
I know what you're saying because I've had people do it. I have tried watching Parks and Rec the same way I've tried watching The Office, and I'm sorry, my brain can only take so much stupid before it ends.
Oh, I totally agree.
And we digress. Let's get back to the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
We should probably go to the questions here.
The first question here, absolutely. Skyla, hit it.
All right. So, the first question is, why do you think Erik Larson, the author,
Wait. You probably got to do a spoiler alert.
All right. We're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about the book.
Well, I was just going to say, like, there's the spoiler alert right above that. Spoiler alert. These questions reveal important details about the story. Finish the book before reading on. Or listening.
Stop
on.
now.
Listening.
But, I mean,
Stop.
you kind of already know that there's a serial killer and a world first.
But I didn't tell everything. Like, I didn't get all the way to the end.
No, you didn't.
Did he die?
This was 1893. Yes, he is dead.
Oh, no.
He was dead anyway. But anyway.
So first off, before I read the first question, let me just note that this is a non-fiction story. This is not fictionalized. It's not historical fiction. It is in the non-fiction category. Although Erik Larson did a fabulous job and it felt like fiction in a lot of different places. It was a great read.
Well, and actually he says that in his notes in the end. He says basically, some of the killing scenes that I talked through, I had to go off of what I knew and what I could figure out.
Surmise.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
Those aren't first-hand accounts from the people that
My
died?
gosh.
Nope, they weren't. Sorry.
Anyway, okay, so having established that it is a non-fiction book, why do you think Erik Larson, the author, chose to tell Burnham and Holmes stories together? How do you think the juxtaposition affects the narrative? Do you think they worked well together? Or would you have preferred to read about just Holmes or just Burnham?
So, go ahead, Griff, and then I'll do mine.
I I actually personally think I would have rather had them as two separate things. I mean, they worked because it was the same timeline, but I'll be honest is that it almost made the book more confusing, and I think I would have preferred it either way. Like, I could have happily read the book all about Holmes and happily read a book all about the World's Fair, because I think they were two very, very large events that were going on, and two very interesting events.
I personally would agree with that, Griff, but I also have to say, I don't think he had enough data to make a book directly just on Holmes. I think that's what it comes down to, is he had to add more data to make this a book that was long enough for people that would want to read it instead of, like a 100-pager.
Agreed.
So I would have to disagree with both of you.
Me too.
The first time I read it, I loved the back and forth. I've always liked that on my books because it keeps you enticed with both stories as you're running through the entire book.
I will agree with that on most books because Dean Koontz does an incredible job at that, and so there's a lot of other authors that do the same thing. But in the end, they actually tie together, where these two characters are completely separate the whole way through. They're never tied together because they never met. Or if they did, it's never said, right? So for me...
That's fine to me because it's just that they worked so... I mean, they were both... The thing I like the most, and I see the tie between them, they were both architects in their own way. And I think that's the line you have to draw between the two of them.
Okay.
And I like it for a slightly different reason. I really like that... a book just about Burnham would be about the White City and about how beautiful, and yes, it was a struggle to get the thing built, and it was it was fleeting, but it would be architecture struggles, it would be manpower struggles, it would be that, and you would take it out of its actual setting. So the setting was the Chicago that you read about with Holmes, that's dark and dirty and smelly and full of blood and full of blue bottle flies, yeah, and covered in soot and just chaos,
nasty drinking water.
And I mean, the people, like the cats and dogs and horses that die, they just lay in the street until they decompose or they freeze. And so knowing where the dankness and the filth that the White City rose out of makes that a more complete picture. And then knowing that this World's Fair that people were coming to, and it was the most amazing thing that they would ever see in their entire lives. And they, it was the Disney World of their day, only more so. And because it was more real-ish. But coming to this and, looking at the White City and then getting murdered because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time and nobody would miss them. And knowing that makes the story of Holmes more complete because you see more completely what the people coming to Chicago were looking for, and what they found instead was a gruesome death.
I guess here's where I'm going to come into it, is because I have done, I've watched shows on H.H. Holmes, and there's a lot more of H.H. Holmes before the World's Fair came around. So it would be... I'm gonna agree. That's where I'm gonna agree with Lonnon. Is I just feel like if they were to meet or something like that, that'd have been cool. But at the end of the day, they are two different. It's two different stories
with the same setting.
It is the same setting, and his building he was building was for the World's Fair, and I get that. But I just don't. I truthfully think that he literally just did not have enough data. Like if he would have, I think he would have written a full book on just H.H. Holmes. But I just don't think he had enough to go on to create a good book that was long enough that he wanted to actually produce it. That's how I feel. Like, not that either story was bad, but that neither one, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they didn't work well together. I get why he did it, and I totally see how it works together. I just personally don't like it. I would have preferred, because they're two totally different things, I would have preferred them different.
And I needed the balance that each story brought to the other. A story about just H.H. Holmes, I would not have been able to get through because it's too gruesome. I would have fallen for somebody charming like that. I would have trusted him. I still, to this day, I believe people. And the Burnham story, I would have gotten too caught up in the minutia, the little problems that he ran into, and it would, I would look at it as this castle in the sky kind of thing. And so I needed both stories to keep both stories grounded.
Well, and I get that, and the reason I think that he didn't have enough material, I guess I'll give a for instance, there's like 3 times in the book where he like goes on for literally, I don't know how long it is in the book, for sitting down reading it, but I hit fast forward 30 seconds like 4 times. Because all he's doing is naming off different types of foods and things that they brought in. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care.
Oh my gosh, those are my favorite details. I want to feel like I'm there.
I get it, but when it's just going on and on, I'm like, okay, I get it. There was really good food. Or there was really cool things. Now, like when they were talking, like when he was talking about, at the very end, he talks about all the different inventions that were there and things like that. That makes sense to me. And that, that was like, okay, that's cool. Cracker Jacks and all these different things.
And that's the stuff that interests you. I knew that as soon as he said the name Tesla, your ears would prick up.
Well, I already knew that he'd already done the 1893 World's Fair. So, like, I didn't need to, I didn't need to know that. I already knew that. But, it was still interesting. It was interesting how much lower in price they came, compared to GE.
Yeah.
All right. So anybody have any other thoughts on that particular question?
Nope. I think we're good.
Okay. Question 2. What did you learn about architecture, and what do you think the fair contributed to the architectural landscape in the United States?
I particularly just learned a lot about the construction methods back in that day. So the fire hydrant, packing it around with manure to keep it warm during the winter.
Right. That was interesting.
That was super interesting to me because running up all the construction sites and mine sites I was on up in Salt Lake, we literally wrapped them in insulation and insulation blankets and everything else to keep everything warm. I just never thought about how they did it in the past, and that was super eye-opening for me.
It's the old version of Christmas lights.
Yes.
Have you seen? I have a friend who put Christmas lights on their lemon tree in the winter so that it would never freeze.
Huh? I've never heard of that.
That's awesome.
Right?
Hold on. That's crazy awesome.
I planted my lemon tree in South Carolina right outside where my fireplace is, so that when it's cold, I turn my fireplace on and it warms up.
Interesting.
Huh.
Again, I digress. All right. So, what did you learn about architecture, Griffith? Anything?
Nah, I guess I didn't learn anything about architecture. Just it was cool about all this stuff that they had to go through to figure out how to put buildings up. And I guess I should have known that the World's Fair had to get torn down, but all the work they put into doing the World's Fair just for 2 years and for it to get torn off.
It wasn't even 2 years. It was May to October. That's what I got.
October to May.
When it was, no, it was. I thought it was May to October.
Well, they opened it in October because of Columbus.
Gotcha. Well, and then they
shut it down October 30th.
That's when the
because
opening.
Someone forgot it was a
right. That's when the opening, when they had the
that's right.
president stuff come. But they didn't actually open the fair until May,
which is smart.
May 1st.
If you've been to Chicago in the winter, nobody wants to.
Yeah, I thought it was really, really. It was really hard to hear that they tore it all down and just didn't care. It's the amount of money that they put into it. It's that manufacturer's building couldn't have been used as a manufacturing facility.
It almost felt like a crime, didn't it? All of that work, all of those deaths, all of that, brain power and manpower and money and it's gone in a puff of smoke.
Gone.
All but 2 buildings. Yeah, all but 2 buildings are gone. And so it's pretty sad. The only reason that I know one of the buildings is still there, one of the buildings is still there because it housed all the art, and no other country was willing to stick their art in anything other than a steel building with actual brick on the outside and a couple other things.
They're no dummies.
Yeah. Smart, but yeah, that's why that one's still standing, because it had to be so well built just so we could get people to bring their stuff. So I thought it was really interesting hearing, some of I think it was the manufacturing building, but maybe it was one of the other ones where all of the soil was good all up to one point, and in the corner it dropped 36 inches or something like that.
Yikes.
in less than 24 hours, and then they had to figure out how to overcome that. The things that they had to think of on how to overcome some of this stuff was really cool. And then other things, they're well, we just have to dig a hole big enough and small enough that we can run it all the way down to bedrock. And still really interesting, though.
All the workers are oh, okay, why don't you do it?
Right. Yeah.
didn't learn. I think the biggest thing I learned about architecture from this book is it's a lot more complicated than I had previously given it credit for. Because to me, architecture, let me be honest, everything I learned from architecture, I learned from Ted Mosby in How I Met Your Mother.
I love you.
Yeah,
I literally think the exact same thing. She says Ted Mosby. I'll be just, thank you.
That was pretty funny. I mean, I wouldn't agree with that statement for me. I mean, I've learned other stuff, but I thought it was really cool that they did have to go into that stuff so they could learn how to make these huge buildings, these skyscrapers. So they go into some of that, and it was really interesting, how they overcame those type of issues.
Well, and I really like that Larson went into those details, because I feel better educated. I mean, certainly couldn't build a building, but feel better educated, and it also speaks to the genius of the people working on these things, of Burnham and Root, and all of even the landscaping architecture. All of that required some quick thinking genius, and we couldn't have understood that if we didn't understand the challenges that they had to overcome.
Well, and I think a lot of that also, I mean, like you look at Burnham, and he is he's really quite smart when it comes to the architecture, obviously, but he also, because he didn't go to these other schools, he just went to a regular school. It makes me wonder if he was one of those ones that's just like, got through the classes because he had to have them to say he was an architect, but then him and Root would just go figure things out. Like, all right, let's try it out.
I think a lot of that, like, he took what he needed and then didn't let
or expounded upon it.
Yeah, didn't let it overtake what he knew instinctively.
Yep.
All right. So we didn't talk about this at all. What do you think the fair contributed to the architectural landscape of the United States?
The Ferris wheel?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny.
I don't know.
It's funny listening to the end of the book, because they talk about how they think the fair actually made it so that we didn't go forward in architecture because we took a bunch of ideas that were old.
Yeah, there was certainly a classical revival after the fair, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, think about America at this period of time. We're just barely 100 years old, just a little bit over 100 years old. Europe still doesn't think we're going to last, and we've got this, new kid syndrome where we just want to be taken seriously. The country just wants to be taken seriously, and if we can have great art and great architecture that looks like Europe, maybe you guys will think we're grown-ups, kind of thing.
Well, but what was crazy is that the architects of America or whatever it was, like how little they wanted to do with it for the first while. And it's just like, well, if we wanted it to, show our architecture prowess, then, all of them needed to get on board.
Right. But if it was a failure, it's their reputation on the line. This was backed by the architecture, architecture is sort of America. Wow, that was sad.
Butchered.
Yeah. But it's their reputation on the line, and they are, it doesn't look like it can happen. They know the timeline. They know how long things take, and they know that there's always going to be something that you didn't account for.
Did they ever back it up? Like, I don't remember him ever saying that they backed it up. Now, I know they backed up the Ferris wheel. He got some of the people from that Architects of America to back up the Ferris wheel, but I don't think they ever backed the World's Fair at all, which is, it's sad.
I'm not sure. I mean, it's protection. This is a new venture, and it could have failed just as easily as it, and with somebody else at the head, then there's no guarantee that this is going to be a success. And if you put your name on the line and it fails, then that can be something you can't come back from.
Well, it almost did fail.
Shoot, yeah, it was really close.
So,
I think we're missing a... Go ahead, Skyla.
Oh, no, I was just going to say they were just hedging their bets.
Right. But I think we're missing a major thing here, too, is I think because of the Chicago World Fair, that's because Walt Disney's father was a part of that as well, is that he got that idea that people would come to see amazing things from all over the place. And I think that's probably where Walt may have gotten the idea to do Disneyland or Disney World.
Definitely.
And I think at the dawn of the 20th century, that was a prime, like, because people were able, because of trains and, steamers, and people were able to travel farther than they had ever traveled in the history of the planet. So you're right, Case. I think that is an excellent point, that this was a turning point in roadside attractions and amusement parks and just building something for the sake of building it. Field of Dreams.
I just remember him rattling off about the numbers of the hundreds of thousands of people that came every day. Like it blew my mind how many people would actually come.
Without a doubt. Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. Okay. So how did the Chicago World's Fair change Chicago? How did it change America? How did it change the world? Discuss some of the inventions and ideas that were introduced at the fair that still impact life today. This is going to be the fun one.
Tesla.
Oh, Tesla. That's exactly what I was about to say.
So you know what's funny though? I don't know if you guys know this, but right before, I think it was like it was like a week or two. I mean, it wasn't very long before it was supposed to open, and Edison sued Tesla for using his style of the socket. No, not the light bulb, just that socket. It was still Tesla's bulb, but it was his socket, and they literally had to go through and rewire all of it, and Tesla had to design a new socket on the fly.
What? Oh, I didn't know about that.
And
but
it was
Tesla.
Millions and millions of light bulbs that they had to get made.
Dang.
So, like, just crazy, though, that, like, you know, because, you know, Edison is just so butthurt that he didn't get the contract that you know, he goes and sues him over it right before to try and make him look bad. And, you know, still pulled it off. Westinghouse and him nailed it.
All right. So for anybody who's a new listener or doesn't know Lonnon really well, his daughter's named Tesla, and he's kind of a little bit obsessed with Tesla and hates Edison.
I don't hate Edison. I just don't. Edison did not invent many things by himself. So the difference between Edison and it was Westinghouse, really, Edison kept anybody that worked for Edison, if you worked for him and you created something, it was Edison's patent. If you did the same thing and you were working for Westinghouse lets you keep your own patent. So that's why Westinghouse wasn't as large of a company as GE was in the end, because he was better to his employees and, you know, wanted to make sure they had a good life as well.
Tesla?
Tesla worked for, no, not Tesla, Westinghouse. Tesla worked with Westinghouse on that project. That's how he got the backing, is through Westinghouse. Westinghouse made his money off of train air brakes. So that's where
that Westinghouse had invented.
Right, Westinghouse invented. But anyway, so it's not that I don't think that, I mean, Edison was a smart guy. He was very business oriented, very smart as far as business goes. He just was not an inventor by trade.
He was not the American inventor.
No, and he totally screwed anybody he could. I mean, without a doubt. And the problem was that he had backing of, you know, the Rockefellers and JP Morgan and all these people that had ridiculous amounts of money, and Tesla didn't. You know, it's amazing. You know, it's funny that Tesla created HD television cameras back in the 1920s, and it just so happens that the SD, the standard definition cameras, were picked up just before he invented them, and so they decided, they're like, oh, we'll never use that. Well, go figure. Now we're all back up to HD.
All right. So, how did the fair change Chicago specifically? Do you think?
I think that that made it so that Chicago was something, because before that point in time, Chicago was just basically a slaughter.
It was a slaughterhouse. So that's really what it was.
It's a slaughter town, and if you worked there or lived there, it's because you either worked for the people that slaughtered everything, or you were basically playing backup to that. And
you were support crew.
And after the World's Fair, people went there and realized that it could become a New York, because at that time, and still to this day, New York is still the city to be. Right.
You don't even have to say New York City. You just say the city.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how much longer.
So I kind of disagree with that in the way. I mean, the way that you've got Burnham and Root and a couple other architects there that were already starting to do skyscrapers at this point. So it was on its way that direction already. I just think that the World's Fair gave it this just massive explosion of income and people willing to try new things, as well as, you know, letting that kind of stuff get done. So, I mean, it was awesome.
I also think that a big part of it was perception, that these people coming to Chicago, they weren't seeing necessarily the dirty, dank, ugly Chicago. They're not going to go back and remember all of that. They're going to go back and remember the White City. And the White City felt very cosmopolitan. It felt very fancy. It felt very advanced. I mean, to them, it would have felt like the future. Oh my goodness, look at these electric lights. Look at this Ferris wheel. We're living in the future. And so
Futureland.
Exactly. Tomorrowland. These people all went home and would tell people the wondrous stories of Chicago. They wouldn't say, well, I mean, in the fair, it was awesome, but Chicago was actually kind of terrible. They would say, in Chicago, they had the electric lights. And so I think perception, Chicago became a very elevated city because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about, I mean, the Great Chicago Fire happened less than 20, or right around 20 years before the World Fair happened. I mean, so you can imagine how much they had to rebuild in that short amount of time, and how much they did rebuild in that short amount of time.
Well, and that probably worked in their favor too, because so many of their buildings are brand new. I mean, think about when you go to a part of the city where everything's new, you're like, oh, this is kind of fancy. And then you go to the part of the city where everything's kind of, and I'm not talking old, because old, you're like, oh, like Charleston.
No,
you're like, ooh, this is still fancy. But like, 40 years ago, you're like, yeah, look at all those houses from the 70s.
Yep. Totally. It's crazy how much Chicago changed, I feel like, because of this.
How did it change the United States?
It made us credible. That's what it did. It made it so that people realized that, when we get together, we can make amazing things, and we can make it as good or better. We can always top that. I think that personally, that's how I feel.
I agree.
And I feel like the inventions that also played in this. I mean, Tesla with all electricity, the Ferris wheel, all the main things we talk about, Cracker Jacks and the Pabs and everything else, like all the great inventions and things that Americans brought to the World Fair. Just said, hey, look at us. We can do this.
And not only that, we showed the world what America is known for, even to this day. Even if it's not quite as true as it was then, we are known as innovators. We are known as people who can just throw it together, people who can take this and make it new and make it something different. And the inventions that were showcased at the fair led to inventions, which led to inventions, which led to inventions. And there was a boom, a technological boom after that probably we didn't see again until the 50s and 60s, and then didn't see again until 10 years ago, where it just you have an invention and enough people see it and can be inspired by it, and it just it's
one
huge.
on top of another. Yes, spikes. I tell you.
All right, we ready for another question?
Hit it.
All right. How was Holmes? So now we're going to talk about Holmes. How was Holmes able to get away with so many murders without becoming suspect? Were you surprised by how easy it was for him to commit crimes without being caught?
No, for me, not as much. I only say that because of what his infrastructure he had built. Does that make sense? Like, he had built this infrastructure to try and hide all the stuff, anything that he could. He's got his rooms with gas. He's got his furnace. He's got so many of these different things that I think that it wasn't as surprising to me. I don't know about the rest of you.
I mean, when he was first starting out, like when he first bought the property where his drugstore was going to be.
Bought? Did he actually ever pay for it?
Yeah. No. That's a good one. No, I think he murdered the lady that owned it after she signed the deed over to him.
No, because that's the first one. I'm talking about the one across the street.
Right. No, I get what you're saying, but I thought he killed that person too. Maybe not.
He asked somebody if they would, and they ran away.
Right.
So I think as he was setting up the infrastructure that he had, I was a little surprised at how easy. So when he sold the original drugstore that we think he killed the lady and she told everybody she moved to California.
He totally killed her.
Absolutely. But when he sold that, he told the guy, "Oh, well, you won't have any competition. There's no other drugstores around," and then moves across the street and opens the drugstore. Why didn't that guy freak out? Like, why didn't that guy? He might have, but he probably had no legal recourse. And I think that's the other thing. There wasn't a whole lot of legal recourse. There wasn't a lot of laws on the books that could be enforced at that point, even though he was, that was a very much a my word is my bond period of time. And he just flouted that. Like, I'm going to take advantage of this situation.
Slapped him in the face. Yes. Like, just blatantly said, okay, yeah, no, I'm not going to be a competitor. And literally 6 months later, he's like one of the most direct competitors.
Yeah. Well, and you know, oh, I lied to you. Oh, poor baby. What are you going to do about it? I mean, like, right. And there wasn't a whole lot he could do about it. So while setting up the infrastructure, it surprised me how much he got away with. Like, he asked a guy to murder somebody and nobody called the cops on him.
Well, I'm thinking about all of the credit and leases and all the furniture and everything else that he claimed that he'd pay off. And then when the collectors started coming, he'd just say, no, the owner's not here right now. Like, directly talking to this person. And no, I'm not the owner, but I can try to reach out for you. And just never bat an eye at it.
Or even, oh, yeah, come on in. I'll, make some dinner, buy some drinks, and then sends them on their way. Oh, yeah, I'll get back to you tomorrow. Again, another of those, my word is my bond cases where people just trusted in a lot of situations. And he just took such advantage of that. Plus, we come back to that charming thing. His charm was his biggest tool. He used it on everybody.
Yeah, without a doubt.
All the way throughout the book. All the way through the book.
Well, I don't think he could have done it without it. Absolutely, he could not have done it without it.
No, he couldn't have.
Oh, no way. Because people have been like, a lot of really weird things happen around that creepy guy. But instead, they said, it's so sad. Dr. Holmes, just all these sad things happen around him, but they never suspected him because he's too freaking charming.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Like, the guy was crazy. I mean, like super, yeah. I don't know what to say. It's just like, it's amazing what he was able to get away with. Definitely. But I think he was smart enough to set himself up not set himself up for failure.
For long-term, shall we call it success?
Well, he succeeded. I mean, like, whether you want to say that it was a good succession, it was still succeeding, or good. Yeah, whatever. It was still succeeding.
I found it really interesting. Near the beginning of the book, they have a doctor who examined him while he was in jail, talking about what he looks like. And if I would have loved to seen somebody else describe him before they knew he was a murderer, because this doctor describes him as having these very mesmerizing eyes, like a mesmerist, like he's going to put a spell on you, and like you can feel the connotation. You can feel that this guy knows that this man is evil incarnate, but everybody else is like, oh, he has the most beautiful blue eyes I've ever seen. So
I'm sure there's got to be some kind of record of that with any of the women that he charmed, that they describe that for whoever they've told.
He charmed and didn't kill?
There were still some that weren't dead, and they'd be like, I was suspicious of him, but his demeanor made it so that you didn't feel like maybe he was bad.
Do you think it's weird that he did all this married? And married to two women?
Many times, not just two women.
Yeah, at the beginning it was two.
I thought it was three at one point.
I guess it's just his personality. He was a user. He used people. He didn't care if they were his wife or not. He was there to be. They were tools.
They were a means to an end.
They were, and so the relationship is going to be different. But it's hard for me because I know all of Mike's business and he knows all of mine, and so I can't. How do you get away with?
Well, that's we're also in a different age. I feel like
that's
back
true.
Then it totally would have been
man's business and woman's business.
Right.
No, you're totally right, Lonnie.
It would have been his business, and he'd have been taking care of it. And as long as she was being taken care of with money, then the parents wouldn't have cared. Nobody would have cared, and they wouldn't have paid attention.
That is true. That's very true. All right. So what else? Try that again. What ultimately led to Holmes's capture and the discovery of his crime? Was this inevitable?
No, I think he slipped up. I think he got too many pans in the fire.
I don't even know if it was that. I think he was I think so. You know how they say that that it constantly increases with a lot of serial killers. They start off one, and then they go a few years, and then it's another, and then it just increases.
It's like a high,
right? Yeah, but the high isn't as big every time, and so they have to do it more often. And so I think exactly. Well, and it's exactly what it is. It's
serotonin.
Yep, serotonin that was created, and so he needs more of that to get that high every time. That, and I think he was probably running out of money, so it was basically a greed / I need my high issue, in my opinion.
Oh, I didn't talk about this for the last question, but I think the fact that he was a doctor he was able to cover up a lot of things for a few different reasons.
Absolutely, like all the smells, tools.
I need a furnace. All of
the skeletons.
I'm gonna sell you a skeleton.
Yeah. The chloroform. Remember, he would buy bottles and bottles of chloroform, and the guy was like, "What do you need them for?" And he says, "I need for scientific experiments." Oh, you're a doctor. Okay, that makes sense. And at this
How's
point,
your experiments going? I don't know what you're talking about.
What are you experiments? What are you talking about? That I'd have been like, oh, okay, no more for you, friend.
Right.
But not only that, but an air, a dual-sided air. So he's got this air of respectability because he's a doctor. But doctors at this point were also considered very ghoulish because they would have to go rob graves to learn because you weren't allowed to do dissections or anything like that. So I think he picked the perfect job because it explained everything for years and years and years.
He picked the only job that could support what he does, what he did.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's the only one that would, that's the only one that would have made it so that he could have done what he did without as much suspicion on him.
I'm just thinking about, do you think the reason that he potentially wanted to have those gas chambers and the furnaces and everything because he went to school to become a doctor and got that craving to see how the body would react in certain ways?
I think it started way before that.
I agree with that, but Case, all scientists, all doctors have this innate craving for knowledge. They want to know more, and at that point, and even today to a certain extent, the body is a complete mystery. And so I want to see what happens when I do this, or what happens when I do this, and I know this will happen, but what happens after? So Case, I think that's an excellent point, that this was a way for him to satisfy the craving for more information.
I think that was probably right, but it sounds the problem is we don't have enough specifics to find out if he killed every one of them differently, because some serial killers do, but most do it the exact same way. But he may have, that would be a very good telltale sign as to whether he was doing it. He was a killer without a doubt, but as to whether he was doing it to learn more or he was doing it just to kill. If it was the same thing over and over again, then, he was just doing it to kill.
That's more a compulsion. Whereas, certainly not to say it was in the name of science, because
it was about his own science.
And it was about power and have that, like you guys, the serotonin release. That was his high. Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about Holmes's hotel. So how did Holmes's hotel contrast with the buildings of the fair? Can architecture reflect goodness or evil, or are buildings neutral until used?
Neutral until used. That being said, obviously, if you've got gas chambers and people burning furnaces built into it, it's like, okay, that's obviously used for this, but architecture by itself is neutral.
I agree with that, except that architecture almost always is. Architecture isn't like other kinds of art. So other kinds of art are many times art for art's sake. And in that case, it's usually neutral. It's how do you perceive it? But with architecture, there's almost always function. And that function, the architect, in this case, Holmes, put in his evil. And so I don't think when he built the building, even before he used it as a murder hotel, I don't think that it was a neutral building. I think that it reflected the architect.
It absolutely reflected the architect, but by itself, it's a neutral. It's neutral as architecture is concerned. Now, the wandering, meandering hallways and things that just made things feel off, I get that, but it's not inherently good or evil, in my opinion.
I'll agree with that, but when you put in the gas chamber, then does it become evil, or is it only evil once it's used as a gas chamber for a human?
Well, so you've got to think about it from the person that built it. So they probably built this room, right? And then he probably had somebody else put these other things in, and then he had somebody else do. So he kept things so oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Separated. I mean,
yeah, it's so separated between all of his different workers that none of them knew enough to make that, to go, oh, this is that. This is a furnace room. This is a gas chamber.
Holmes always knew what it was and
he
what
did.
It was for. So in that case, I think that, and I totally understand what you're saying, a building built, like, just if I would throw up a shed,
inanimate object is not good or evil.
But this particular object was built for the specific purpose of killing people, just like the building, the showers at Auschwitz would I mean, I can't say that they're neutral because they were built for the express purpose of genocide.
I would agree with that, but what I'm saying is that inherently the inanimate object isn't good or evil. It's the purpose and the reasoning for building behind it. So the object, the architecture itself is not evil, but the reason for building it absolutely was.
I get that. Okay, I get that. So can you have architecture that is evil, or is it always neutral until it's used?
I think it's always neutral.
So, like,
I'm seriously trying to think of any. What do you have something in mind, Skyla? Because I can't think of anything that's just evil.
Well, I'm actually thinking of the opposite. What about a temple?
Still, same thing. It's pretty from the outside. If you know what it's for, it gives you good feelings, right? But it's not inherently good or evil. Like the building itself, to me, now obviously that, this is all Lonnon speaking, but to me, it's an inanimate object. It does give me good feelings because I know what it's about. I've been in one. I've been in them. They are very pretty buildings, but are they inherently good or evil? No. What do you think, Case and Griff?
I would agree. I think that ultimately they, especially if we go with like a temple or a church side of things until they're dedicated, it's just another building.
Now, if you're, it's actually the exact same thing. I mean, if you're thinking about Holmes's building versus a temple, right? So they're both just inanimate objects built as a building, but then they have a specific purpose, both of them. And one, that specific purpose was absolutely evil, and one, the specific purpose, in my opinion, is not. It's good, and it's
divine.
Yes. So as the building itself goes, it's not inherently evil, but the design and the purpose of it. So I guess, I mean, yes, it could be if you're talking about the design of it is meant for this specific type of thing, but it's not. It's really just comes down to what they're going to use it for.
Okay, so how about this? Burnham and Holmes, both architects, both built buildings. Let's say both of them died immediately after both of those buildings are completed. Do the buildings still serve their purpose, or are they just buildings?
I think they're just buildings at that point in time, and they figure out what they are after the fact.
Like you're saying that Holmes built it, never used it, even though he had his gas chamber, even though he had his furnace, even though he had all these things.
It's totally complete. It's ready for the first murder, but it has not been committed. Holmes dies.
Just a building.
I agree with that.
Building. Yep.
I agree. But what about Burnham's?
Burnham
building.
Burnham didn't design any of those. I mean, he had all these other architects design them. He was just the one that running it all. But that being said, same thing. Just a building.
Just a building, and probably had a more broad possible use.
Yes. Not one that's more directed towards what he wanted it for. Totally. Well, I find funny actually no, in the first part of that.
It's actually not. There's the design and the purpose of the buildings that Burnham was being an architect of. It was a specific design for a specific, like the women's building, right? It was a specific building for the women's building. That's what it was for. It's no different than Holmes's specific building of killing people. It still had a specific purpose, albeit a bad one.
Yes.
That's true.
Yes, I agree with that.
But it would be easier to convert one of the fair buildings to something else than Holmes's building.
A murder home. A murder hotel.
You're walking around the hotel and being like, what the freak is this here for?
I like that gas chamber. That's silent proofed and
I don't know
every
about
soundproofed.
Because, I mean, yes, his was all wood and not well built, but neither were those buildings. I mean, the majority of those buildings, they had the staff on the outside, and the they were built to be torn down,
which is sad. But anyway, okay, I think we've beaten that horse to death.
Right.
I actually really like the conversation with that, because I went into it on a different side, thinking a building could be inherently evil or good, but you guys convinced me.
Well, and it's totally a personal opinion. I mean, everything is, right, but it's really, you've got to break things down into separate entities, and then that's when you can start making a better decision, in my opinion.
Yep. All right, so how did the White City contract, or no, that's not
contract.
No, contrast. How did the White City contrast with Chicago, the Black City?
They have a typo.
They do.
That's funny. It was so, the architecture was so old, but yet so new. I guess
Fresh.
That makes sense. Fresh. Thank you. Perfect. And that's the thing that the White City brought against Chicago. Chicago is a factory town and a slaughterhouse and all these negative connotations, but the White City brought such new livelihood to it all.
Elevation.
Was it already the Black City, or did they just go, this is obviously the White City, so that's the Black City? It's like here's all of our sheep, and that's the black sheep.
I don't know. Honestly, it may have just been in contrast, because the brighter something is, the darker the shadows around it look.
Yeah, it certainly could have been.
True. Very true.
But the White City, and we talked about this just a second ago, the White City was all facade. The White City was fake. It was built to be torn down.
Totally.
It was skin deep. It was beautiful, but it wasn't real. And I think that's part of what made it so enchanting, was you knew it wasn't going to be around forever. You knew that you would probably never see it again.
Well, and that's what's crazy. Like that's the one thing about the World's Fair that I didn't know. Like, I didn't realize that they had torn it down, or why they had torn it down, or that it caught fire in some of the buildings, all those different things. I had no idea.
Yep.
And now, looking back on it, had he had enough time to do it, right? I don't think they would have necessarily built it that way. They probably would have built good buildings, were solid, that would have done, that they could have turned into something else, sold off to manufacturers or companies or whatever. But they didn't have time. They didn't have time to build it the real way.
They definitely did not. But even being fake, and even being temporary, and even making the shadows feel darker, I think it still brightened up the city in general. So yeah, it looks darker, but it's actually brighter than it is.
Yeah.
I mean, just like a room where the sun comes in.
Like we were talking about in the beginning, like it changed Chicago for the better. It brought people in to say, okay, this city can be greater than a factory town, a slaughter town. It can be a metropolitan area.
Thank
you.
A metropolis.
A metropolis. That's what I was trying to think of. And be such an incredible empire. I think that's what that brought.
It brought legitimacy to Chicago, is what it did.
Absolutely.
But yes, I think Skyla's got a good point there, that the White City was a facade. It was what Chicago could be, maybe, if it wasn't so dank and dark and dingy to start off with.
Well, I kind of disagree with that a little bit. I think that Chicago was built on reality. The reality is people eat meat, and if you want to eat meat, you have to kill animals. And Chicago was built on, if you want things made cheaply, you have to have a factory, and you have to have factory workers. And so Chicago was built on stark reality. And I think the White City just brought a little bit of beauty to that starkness, and made Chicagoans and made the country go, it doesn't just have to be one or the other. We can have reality, but it can also be beautiful.
They can have the reality with the refinement of the
good word,
of the upper echelons, if you will. And totally, I agree. I mean, but it brought those people in, is really what it came down to. Those people were now, it was we could go to Chicago and live in Chicago.
Yep.
I'm so excited for this next question. So excited.
All right, here it comes. What do you think of Holmes' claim that he was the devil? Can people be inherently evil? How would you explain his strange allure and cold-hearted behavior? All right, Case, do it.
Well, it brings back to the conversation you guys all had on the, gosh dang, what's the podcast?
Yeah, you're talking about the EMP one.
Yes, and it's exactly the same question that Skyla posed, and I wanted to answer it so bad. Are people inherently evil? Kind of hard to jump into this one, because I didn't see it coming, to be honest. Are they inherently evil?
Well,
everyone makes choices. We'll put it that way.
let's define the word inherent,
please.
All right, I'm looking it up so I can be official.
Oh, I like it. Dictionary. Skyla is our resident. If you don't know the answer, she'll know person. So I'm surprised she didn't know it off the top of her head.
I do, but I want it to be official. Like, I know what I think it means. I know what it means to me.
I know what it means to me, exactly. I know what it means to me, but I couldn't define it to you.
Okay, so inherent means existing in something as a permanent, essential, or characteristic attribute. So any form of mountaineering has its inherent danger. So permanent, essential, or characteristic attribute.
Permanent.
Okay, well, with that phrase, then no.
Yeah. No. But no, people are not inherently evil because you always have the choice to not to be. God has given us all that right.
Yeah, but the problem is, so maybe we are. I mean, like, look at Cain, right? And without the right teachings and without the right knowledge, what is wrong? So that one's a really hard one. That one's got a slippery slope as to whether people are inherently evil or not. It's still a hard one.
So the thing about inherent and that definition of inherent, it is not exclusive. So you can be inherently good and inherently evil. So I could say any form of mountaineering has its inherent excitement, and I can say any form of mountaineering has its inherent dangers. They are not mutually exclusive. You can be both. We are inherently good. We are inherently.
Oh, daggum, Skyla, why don't you just break it down there for us? Jeez. Well, that's just, then yeah, in that aspect of things, then yes, we've all chosen to be good in certain things and been evil in other things. All of us have.
Without the teachings there, I don't know that I could say that, and without God in my life, I don't know that, it would be that it's not inherent for people to be evil. Now, can they learn to be good and can they learn to overcome that? Yes, I think so. But the problem with that phrase and that definition is that it's a permanency. So you're always evil.
Permanent or essential or characteristic attribute.
Gotcha. Okay. Well,
it can be permanent, but it doesn't have to be. And I think that our inherent evil and our inherent good are permanent attributes of our souls, of our spirits. I think that we are both. And I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, Lonnon. I don't think that any human can be truly without God, because he's with us all the time, whether we notice or whether we don't. And I think that in my experience, and this is just my experience, the good almost always outweighs the evil. People are going to make bad choices, but most people, and H.H. Holmes excluded, most people don't do it on purpose. They don't hurt people on purpose. They try to be good, but the evil's going to creep in there sometime.
I would agree with that. But I think that it's something that people have to work at. It's not something that, it would be easier to steal and lie than it is to...
we all have evil tendencies, all of us. Just think about road rage.
Yeah.
The nicest person in the world, and all of a sudden someone cuts them off and they lose it. And that's an evil action, evil reaction, to that. So yes, we all could be good. The best people face to face, but as soon as someone cuts us off in traffic, we can instantly turn our mind to evil. Oh, that person, and just come with a whole bunch of reasons why that guy is a terrible person in the world.
Well, and let's look at children. Children, because Lonnie, you talked about teachings. Children, even without teachings, can have some of the most selfless acts. Kids just give you things. they are constantly, oh mom, I found this for you, or I was hiking with Dane last weekend, and this little girl was picking flowers off the side of the trail and was just handing them to every person that she saw. And they can be incredibly selfless, but they can also be incredibly selfish. And
yes.
and I think that
well,
shows
not to say that my kids are, but
all kids
but
are.
I've seen that, obviously.
All kids are. And I think that shows that our inherent dichotomy, that we are inherently evil and we are inherently good. We have inherited both of those traits from divine sources.
But here's something that's weird about that. You think about it, right? And you get this. Oh, it's dopamine, not serotonin. Anyway.
Oh, good job.
But you get this dopamine reaction either way. So if it excites you when you do something wrong, you get that dopamine, that dose. And if it excites you when you do something nice, like this little girl handing out flowers, it probably made her feel good because she was getting this dose of dopamine, right? But it made her feel good. So it's what's funny about that is that the dopamine doesn't care whether you did something evil or you did something good. You still get that same dose. And so where these psychopaths, the only way for them to get that dopamine, that hit, is for them to, they do whatever they can to get that hit, right? And so whether that, I'm sure that there's plenty of psychopaths out there that aren't necessarily serial killers, that they've just found another way of getting that dopamine hit.
Okay, so that's a great segue. Do you think that Holmes was pure evil? And I'm not going to say inherently because we've already discussed that all of us are. But do you think he was evil, that he was the devil, or do you think he was just mentally ill?
I think that he's mentally ill. I just think that I mean, it'd be the same way as someone coming down here that was a schizophrenic or something like that. That was kind of his disease.
Yep, I would agree with Griff.
So no good, no evil, just ill.
I think that most serial killers that have that tendency are
there's evil actions and there's good actions. It doesn't really matter whether you're ill as to what is causing that, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. I just think that that side of things is that he was very much a person that did many, many evil acts and didn't have any sympathy for them because he just didn't have that built into him, and that was he was high on power with no sympathy. He didn't know how to sympathize with people, and that's a mental illness. There's lots of people that don't know how to sympathize, and
he found what gave him that dopamine hit, and he just chased after it.
Yeah, and I think lots of serial killers are that way.
I agree.
Okay, so here's my thing. He knew it was wrong. He knew it was wrong to kill people. Yes, it gave him that dopamine hit, but he knew it was wrong. And he found ways to avoid being caught from that thing. Because yes, I agree, he was certainly mentally ill.
Real quick on that. You say he knew he was wrong.
I didn't say I knew he was wrong. I said he knew it was wrong to kill.
He knew it was wrong to kill. He was taught that it was wrong. Did he know that it was wrong to kill? Do you get what I'm saying? Like maybe he didn't think that it was wrong because of that illness. You don't know. And so that's all true. I'm saying is that you can't say for sure he knew it was wrong. Now, he was absolutely taught that it was wrong because they do talk about his parents and how he was raised in some sort of Christian. I can't remember what he was, but
I think they were Baptist.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, so anyway, finish on with your question.
All right, so the rest of the question, how would you explain his strange allure and cold-hearted behavior?
I think we kind of already said that with his... I think that was part of his illness, is that he had no sympathy side of things, and he knew how to manipulate, and was very, very good at manipulating people.
I don't know. Go ahead, Case. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, and he can emulate emotions so well, like Lonnon said earlier, is that the fact that he was able to just jump into that emotion that person needed at that exact moment and then tie himself to that person so deeply.
So, from what I got out of it, he wasn't really cold-hearted from what I can see. I mean, was he a psychopath? Yeah. Was he, did he enjoy killing?
Murderer? Yes.
Yeah. But, the way that just about everybody described him is he was weird and a little bit odd, but I really liked the guy.
But that doesn't mean that he wasn't cold-hearted. So I think cold-hearted is referring to his murder, that he could cold-heartedly kill somebody, and that I really, really like the guy is, like Kay said, another manipulation. It is him getting what he wants from people by making them do what he wants them to do and not knowing.
Right. He had a thirst for power. So that's how he had his allure. I mean, his allure came from basically him learning how to manipulate other people. And so that was pretty easy. So I guess I get what you're saying with the cold-hearted behavior. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. So let's go back to the fair. Burnham, architect Frederick Law Olmsted.
Olmsted was the one that did the landscape.
Correct. Yes. Landscape architecture, not just landscape.
Right.
Ferris, who obviously made the Ferris wheel, and Holmes were all visionaries in their own ways. Discuss what drove each of these men, whether they were ever truly satisfied, and how their lives ultimately end. So let's start with Burnham. So what drove him?
What drove him was his need to upscale everybody that went to Harvard and Yale.
Upscale?
Or outdo.
Yeah. Okay.
Prove that he was better than them.
Upstage. Yeah, that's a better word. Yeah. Olmsted, I think he what drove him was the want to beautify everything without overcomplicating it.
I disagree with that just a little bit. It says near the beginning of the book that Olmsted wanted legitimacy for his art. He wanted landscape art to be art for art's sake. He wanted he described that he would create, like, he created Central Park also, and he would be creating Central Park, and then he'd be almost done and somebody would be like, I really want some roses over here because my wife really likes roses,
or I want to put a racetrack over here.
Yeah. And so he found it very frustrating that people didn't see his art as art. They saw it as a place to put stuff that they needed. And so I think what drove him was the legitimacy of his art.
The legitimacy of landscape architecture. I get that. That makes sense. Yeah, you're absolutely right on that one.
Do you think landscape architecture is a real thing? Like something that's got legitimacy now?
No.
I think it does. I think that there's... I don't. I'm going to go with an example. So if you don't think that, so someone goes and puts roses and random trees and everything in a house, and none of them are the same, because let's say there's 10 kids live in the house and they pick 10 different styles that are at that.
Just chaotic.
It's just chaos. It's not... There's no art. There's no
form or function to it.
Right. And so, yes, I think there is an art form to it. I mean, I'll go with it is that a house gets set off by a lot of times by its landscape.
Well, look at the gardens, in France, at oh gosh, I can't. Some of those castles, some of those gardens that they have, that they don't form, or they're not. There's no form or function. There's form and function to them, but they just are there, and they're very pretty. But if it was all chaotic, would it be as pretty? I would have to agree with Griffith. I don't think so.
And I don't disagree with that at all. I think landscaping and landscape architecture are two different things. So landscaping is what we do around our houses to make our houses look beautiful. Landscape architecture is more, the landscape is a canvas, and it is a piece of art. It's like a painting, and you have to look like an abstract painting. It doesn't look like, so the way Olmsted described, he hated the gardens, the formal gardens in Europe, because they were too you could see the human hand too much in them, and it was too perfect. And he wanted the play of light and shadow, and he wanted the colors to work in certain ways, and so it was more like he saw huge picture, like we see big-ish picture. He saw huge picture. He could see the whole thing in his mind before it was laid out, and knew exactly where every stroke of paint, every bit of white was going to go, and every bit of purple was going to go, and how the sun was going to shine on this part at this time of day, and this part. So landscaping is kind of paint by numbers.
Human. Yeah, it's human. You can see the human interaction with the landscaping.
It's like our paint by numbers. And what Olmsted was trying to accomplish is a Rembrandt, is Jackson Pollock, is Monet.
I don't know about that totally, because he also, I think I think I totally get what you're saying, and with the architecture, but I think that there was more underlying stuff that he had to have done before he could make it look the way he wanted it to look.
Exactly. Yes.
Versus, taking what you got and just making it look good.
Right, and that's not what I mean. I mean, like, he didn't want it to look like he had sculpted it. He wanted it to look like he wanted it to look.
Right.
And he didn't want it to look perfect. But
Deal.
Yeah, you're right. He absolutely had to change a ton. What about Ferris? We're a family from inventors. Ferris was, made a pretty big impact in the world with his one invention and continues to do so. So what do you think drove him? Why would he work so hard at this particular thing?
I think he was trying to beat the Eiffel Tower. I
think he was a young kid that wanted to outdo
prove
Eiffel.
him wrong. Yeah, you wanted to outdo Eiffel and prove him wrong. And what better way to do that than a metal structure that goes up as an antenna? And he made it something that did the same height but spun.
Yeah. Oh, you can put up a tower. Oh, I think I'll make it spin.
Yeah, I just think
with basically rail cars in between.
Right.
Yeah, that thing must have been monstrous.
I found a picture of it.
I think that
send that to me so I can post it.
He was just trying to outdo Eiffel, and had nothing like it set him off very much. Yes, but I think that was all about I'm better than you. Nay.
You bring up a really interesting point, Fuff. Do you think that competition is necessary for advancement?
Yes, I think without competition, there is certain people that are going to advance just because they want to ease stuff in their life. But I think without competition, no.
I mean, you can advance without competition, but with competition, it makes things easier. I mean, I'll give you for instance, in Dad's machine that makes, the fertilizer out of the air. There's not really a competition out there for it. And so it's harder for us to legitimize it because there's not a competition. If there was, it'd be like, oh, well, you're not the only company doing it. So obviously there's some legitimacy to it.
Yeah, and not only that, but also the way I was looking at it is I'm going to go is that what made it so that the light bulb came around and all of that was all competition. I mean, all of our leaps and bounds that happened in the early 1800s were a lot to do with competition that was finally allowed to have happen, where before there was the governments that were involved and they didn't want competition.
Well, and I think governmental competition can help too. Let's look at the space race between us and the Soviet Union. The only reason, we went to the moon was to beat the Russians to it.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that we would have ended up there anyways. I think that we got there faster, absolutely, and it was the only way to get there as fast as we did, but that was already in play.
So do you think that competition inspires or competition hastens?
I think that it hastens. I don't know if it is inspiring because most of the time, what are you competing against to be? If there's nothing to compete against, what's inspiring? I think that competition is what hastes stuff.
I think it's both. I think it inspires and hastens, but it really depends on what subject you're talking about because it could be multiple things. But I mean, so it could be either or both.
Either or both. I mean, I am 44 now.
What?
Yeah, I turned 44 on Friday.
No, I get that. Oh, and I meant to text you. So I mean, bad brother.
It's okay. No
stress. But what does the 44 have to do with anything?
Yeah, that's what I was
getting old.
At.
I'm
old.
Oh,
got you.
Okay.
Yeah, I walk into the kitchen and go, why was I walking in? No, I don't remember. Yeah.
Well, that's the sign of getting old. I've been getting old for like 10 years.
Yeah.
So
whatever.
Right. So I don't think that. I guess I'll agree along with Lonnon on some of that because I just don't know. I think inspiration comes from competition. Is trying to just compete. I don't know if it helps go and lead it to something else.
It would be interesting to go back and look at famous inventors and look at their competition. So, I mean, we have Tesla and Edison. We have more recently there was a movie Ford and Ferrari, right?
Ford versus Ferrari, yeah.
Right. just what pushes and can competition push you too far?
Oh yeah, especially in Ford versus Ferrari.
What's too far?
Well,
I mean, that's the thing.
Money wise, sorry, I'm thinking money wise.
Yeah, but
I think
was
it I think it depends on what's far. I mean, I'm gonna go with it yes, because if you go to like a war, that is too much competition, and that leads to an outcome of because of the competition.
Okay. All right. So I remember the question I was going to ask. Can you be successful without a competitive streak?
I hope so, because I'm not very competitive.
Yep.
I don't.
Are
think
competitive people more successful?
Not necessarily.
No, I don't think that there's I don't think it has anything to do with competitiveness.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So we're getting kind of near the end. We have run through our questions, and we've run through more than an hour. So let me just ask one more question of everybody. Did you like the book, and would you recommend it to others?
I was surprised by Lonnon's answer, so Lonnon, go first.
No, I didn't really like the book. I thought it was okay. What I did like about it is learning stuff about the World's Fair. I mean, I could have given, if there's H.H. Holmes wasn't in it, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal for me. Personally. But now, was it a bad book? No, it wasn't a bad book. It was written well. It had good information. But I guess both you and Case so Skyla and Case, both of you said it was a really good book. So maybe I was just expecting more out of it than I got. Maybe that's what it was. I don't know.
Could be.
And that's where I was saying is I think it could be two different books, and it would have been just as interesting for both of them. That I don't like. The H.H. Holmes is cool, but whatever. I guess I've dealt with enough with H.H. Holmes that. Did I think that the book was great in telling either story very well? No, I think there was a lot of information that was left out on both stories.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Case, go ahead.
No, I think me and Skylar are on close to the same page.
I think so.
I enjoyed the book just because I liked the way they played off each other, the stories did, and the way that it showed, like in the last question we had, that all these people were visionaries in their own way, and I like how they tied them all in to what was going on in the exact same time period, and how each of them chose to take their ideas and their wants and their everything else and put it towards something so great, either be great evil or great good.
I agree. I enjoyed the symmetry of the different moments that happened within Holmes's life and the fair's life. I enjoyed the more completeness of the world, where I feel like if there was just one book of each, it would less complete. And like Griffith and Lonnon said, yeah, there was information that was left out, but I think even so, I think the story was more complete than either story by itself could. Just understanding the world around the fair. And I also went into this book with absolutely no expectation. I read it through a different book club, and it was suggested, and so we did it. And I went into it, and I was very pleasantly surprised. And it's one of my favorite books. I really enjoy history. I really enjoy nonfiction, and I love how this felt. It felt fictional. It felt like a murder novelist could have come up with this idea of having a murder at the fair. So a murderer at the fair.
A murder hotel.
It feels stranger than fiction. Like, it's like just crazy. So I really like how well it was written. I liked hearing about these, like Kay said, these great men applying their visions to events and spectacles and achieving goals, and how they differ, and what different choices they made, and I just really enjoyed it.
Was it the transportation building, the one that was like the biggest one that the roof fell in on, or is that something else?
I can't
remember which one it was, but I'm looking at pictures on Wikipedia, and oh my goodness, the fact that building got torn down. I mean, like, it was stunning, but it's just crazy.
But it was fake.
Yeah, so overall, just one other question. On a scale of 1 to 5, what would you guys do? I'd probably give it about a solid 4.
Agreed, 4. Maybe 4.5.
I'd give it a 3. Maybe 2 3/4.
3 is probably where I put it. I mean, was it a horrible book? No, I don't think that it was a terrible book. Was it something that I would go back and reread again?
Definitely not.
Probably not.
That's funny because me and Skyla have listened to this or read this book. This is my second time now. Skyla's probably listened to it
my
3 or 4
second
times.
time also. Nope,
But
just
I think
my
it was
second.
just okay, cool. I just think listen to it a second time was another because I already know what happened and all, but it was still really really eye opening. Just the amount of stuff.
I was able to pick up on a lot more stuff the second time through
Yes.
than the first time because the first time it's all like what's happening, what's going to happen because I didn't know anything about Holmes or about the fair, and so it was all brand new information.
Same here. So I guess where Griff and Lonnon, they kind of knew a little bit about the Chicago War Fair and H.H. Holmes. I literally had no idea going into it the first time.
So I had no idea who H.H. Holmes was. No clue on that one. So, I mean, like that part of it was intriguing, but as far as the World's Fair, I've known for a long time that that's the one that Tesla lit up. And so I've always done a little bit of research on it. Case, I sent that link in here that has like all, so it shows that, but actually there's a better picture on Wikipedia for our listeners as well, of the Ferris wheel. But that link I sent you is actually all the inventions that came out of the 1893 World's Fair that people still know today.
Okay, one last thing that I want to end on. This is not one of the questions that we found on the website. Do you think that H.H. Holmes would have been as successful if he kept his original last name of Mudgett?
Don't think it would have mattered.
I don't think
know
so
if that would
either.
have changed anything.
Well, okay. Let me rephrase this. It doesn't matter because the name doesn't matter, but what does matter is that he's able to, because he has all these different aliases, he's able to, kind of hide in plain sight. Does that make sense?
Yes. I also think that he was, because he changed his name right around the same time Sherlock Holmes appeared on the scene as a fictional character and became famous. And so him using Holmes as his last name, he was giving himself not necessarily heirs, but more legitimacy. He was giving himself a little more legitimacy and showing people kind of slyly, look, I'm super smart too. We have the same name.
Yeah.
It's subconscious. It was a subconscious thing. That he was like, look at this great detective. I'm going to fool all the detectives with the same name as him.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I get that.
I just think his original last name is very
terrible.
Terrible.
Sorry.
It is
I guess people don't have a choice.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. So, all right. So that wraps up our book club on The Devil in the White City. What did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you split? Do you wish it was 2 books? Do you wish there was more information about one side or the other? Let us know on all of our social media platforms. Case, go ahead and give us all those addresses.
Plug us.
Once again, it would be Instagram and Facebook, and that's at King Ugly Crew, or hit us up on our Gmail, which is kinguglycrew@gmail.com, and then Lonnon with the WordPress.
Our WordPress is kinguglycrew.wordpress.com.
We will be reading another book next month, and we will be getting information up about that very soon. And we would love for you to join us reading this book, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on the podcast. But again, thank you so much for joining us again, and we will see you next week.
Stay ugly.